The year is 776 BCE. The place is the great city of Olympia, in the Peloponnese region of ancient Greece. It is here that every 4 years for 8 days the world comes together to celebrate the Olympic Games. This video is part of a series where I attempt to recreate iconic historical scenes based on written accounts and artistic depictions. And while this one does not have a specific historical event as its basis, it does take inspiration from the many vase paintings depicting the Olympics in ancient Greece. So let's get started. To give the scene a cinematic feel, I thought it would be cool if there was a crowd in the stands. Now, most depictions of the Olympics on vases show only 2 rows of figures with athletes competing in the center. But I thought I could make an exception and add a few more rows to show how all eyes are on the men racing across the finish line. I used the seating arrangement of the Panathenaic Stadium in Athens as inspiration, since it's the best preserved ancient stadium in Greece and can still be used today. I added the white lines to give the illusion of depth, like the bleachers are receding into the distance. But I also didn't want all the attention to be on the stands, so I kept most of them filled with dark shapes to represent the crowds within. The main focus of the painting will be the men racing in the center. There are several sports that were featured in the ancient Olympic Games, but I wanted to pick the ones that are still played today. These include wrestling, discus throwing, and javelin throwing. For my scene, though, I needed some way to differentiate between the various athletes. Since vase painters didn't use different costumes to distinguish the different sports, I decided to use color instead, and what better way to represent the heat of the competition than with the blazing sun beating down on these men. For the background of the painting, I chose to depict the Temple of Zeus, which stood right outside the original Olympic Stadium. Its columns were fluted, meaning they had vertical grooves running along their surfaces, making them easier to grip onto and pull yourself up when climbing them. Speaking of pulling yourself up, I used the long pole vault for inspiration when giving these guys those buff arms and legs, but I did add a little extra definition to his traps and lats. Since even though he might look like an ancient Greek statue, he is indeed a real man who wrestles in the dirt for a living. And speaking of dirt, I wanted to give the impression that these athletes are covered in dust and sweat from all their hard work. To do this, I used a dry brush technique to add light brown and black streaks across the figures. This gives the illusion that the paint isn't just sitting on top of the canvas, but that it's actually stuck in cracks and crevices on their skin. Now, a big part of the Olympic experience is the victory ceremony, where the winners were awarded olive wreaths, which symbolized victory and honor. I depicted this moment by having one athlete hold up his wreath high above his head, with another about to grab him and bring him down to the ground. By the way, this is my depiction of the scene. A lot of vase paintings show the exact opposite, with the victor standing on a platform with one hand raised in the air and the other holding a wreath. Now, while the Olympic Games were meant to promote peace and unity between city-states, the truth is that war was never far behind. In fact, the Olympics were canceled during several major conflicts, including the Greco-Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War. The Romans also eventually conquered Greece and put an end to the traditional games. I wanted to symbolize the end of the ancient Olympics with a darker scene. Here we see a group of Roman soldiers closing the doors to a temple, effectively ending the festivities and carrying on the legacy of the games. They no longer belong to the Greeks. Fast forward now to 1896, and we find ourselves in Athens once again at the first modern Olympic Stadium. Here we see a group of runners lining up at the starting pistol, ready to begin the 100-meter dash. This is all captured in a vintage footage film style, complete with flickering lights and a hazy effect. I really tried to sell the idea that this was filmed over 100 years ago, and to do this, I looked at actual footage from the 1900 Paris Olympics. I noticed that these films weren't really high resolution, so I tried to match that here. Also, there was this weird distortion effect in some of the shots, so I applied that to my scene as well. We can then transition to a quick montage of iconic modern Olympic moments. We have Bolt running in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Then we cut to Michael Phelps winning a gold medal in swimming. And then we go back to the Olympics opening ceremony, where athletes from all over the world walk through the stadium waving their country's flag. Now this final scene takes us back to Olympia, where the Olympic flame burns brightly at night. Silhouettes of diverse athletes in the foreground give the impression that this eternal flame has been passed down through generations across the globe. And by doing so, the Olympic spirit continues to live on. If you'd like to learn more about ancient Olympic history, you can check out the documentary series linked below. As always, thanks to my supporters for making these videos possible.